Today's presentation is about conformity, which is this particular presentation is something that has not always been, I would say, the most popular presentation. Let's fix this here that I've done because I think a lot of people object to different portions of it. Let me just fix this real quickly here. Just because the idea of conformity is not something that's very popular these days to a lot of people. But I did want to talk about it, and this is the nice thing is a short presentation, and then after I'm done, I'll take as many questions as people have. I've noticed we've had a lot of people on these calls that are currently summer associates and have questions about that, so you're welcome to ask questions about that, or pretty much anything after the presentation. So one of the things to understand is that the legal profession does require quite a bit of conformity, and it requires it really from the time you're in law school, even before that to some extent, to when you get out. And so in order to really do well in the legal profession, it's important that you really understand how to conform. And really, if you want to work in a large law firm, which for some reason a lot of people on these calls seem to want to, then you really need to understand the ability to conform. Conformity, by the way, is important in a lot of perspectives. It's important if you work in companies as an attorney, or if you work in companies doing various things. And so there really is a cycle to conformity. And something that tends to happen is very early on, people go to law school and a lot of people will drop out because they realize they can't conform. Other people will stay in law school and graduate and then realize that there's no way they're going to work in a law firm or even work as a lawyer because they can't conform. And so they have all these kind of preconceived ideas about what's important in terms of their lives and how they can fit in. And so for many people, understanding the importance of conformity is probably among the most important aspects in learning how to conform in a way that really matches what you want to be. Just one second. People doing work outside my office. But so the big thing about conformity a couple things that I wanted to talk about, at the beginning is when I was growing up, there was a guy on my street that he had a large family of probably 6 kids and they lived in a fairly small house and the kids could never really, afford clothes. And so I remember my mom went out and would buy them the kids clothes for Boy Scouts and things because the father wasn't making enough money. And the father was a plumber, but in Detroit at the time, there was a union. And so if you wanted to make a lot of money, you had to work you had to work for the union. And if you didn't work for the union, there were certain jobs and so forth that most jobs that paid a lot of money that you couldn't do. But he didn't really want to be part of the union because for whatever reason, he didn't believe in it or he didn't feel like he got along with the people in the union. And so he did all these work kind of independently and he didn't make a lot of money and that hurt his career. And then I knew it, the funny thing is then when I grew up and went to high school and I didn't go to the same high school as those kids did, but my best friend's girlfriend her dad was a plumber and he was a union plumber, and they lived very well and had a lot of money, and she actually almost went to the Olympics as a gymnast, and the family could afford to take her all over the country and stuff doing that. So the point is that conforming in different organizations can mean a lot, and if you don't know how to conform with people, there's certainly other jobs you can do. You can work on your own and so forth. But if you do want to work in a law firm, you need to understand how to conform and how to get along with the groups of people inside of those law firms. And really, honestly, in my opinion, one of the most important aspects of being an attorney. And for me personally, it's something that I wasn't comfortable with in a lot of respects. Certainly was used to playing the game, but there were a lot of things that I didn't like about it. And when you're an attorney in a large law firm, most attorneys that are attorneys in large law firms, and with some exceptions, have been conforming since they were young children. And they see rewards in being in conforming. They know that if they conform, there's money, there's status, and they can live a somewhat predictable life. And so they go to school and they play by the rules and they try to move into the best schools and so forth in order to succeed. And the people that stay attorneys in large law firms are good at that. And as time goes by, they become more and more political and they learn how to conform and do what's expected of them and then take risks that are calculated but that match the needs of wherever they're trying to work. And frankly, some people are very comforted by conformity and do well by it, and they will do whatever they can to play by the rules. And if you do that, you're much more likely to be successful in a large law firm. And if you don't have the ability to conform, you're going to have a much more difficult time staying an attorney in a large law firm. It's just how it works. The attorneys that can't conform will always often fail. And it's not that they're failing, it's just that the organization match what they should be doing and what they're capable of doing. And it's sad from my standpoint, because many attorneys that would otherwise succeed, because of their ways of thinking about the world, or their upbringing, or their family, and how they were socialized and so forth, aren't able to conform. And you may think about how you've been socialized and how groups helped you conform when you've been growing up and so forth. I noticed that that the mother of my children, or ex-wife, will constantly is taking our kids, and since the time they were little, to all sorts of birthday parties and networking them and showing them how to get along with other kids and activities, and that's something that wasn't exposed to as much growing up. So that's ability to be socialized at a very young age, repeatedly, several times a week, can make a big difference, and it can help you learn how to conform with groups. And then also, when you go to school, how seriously you take that and so forth can make a big difference. And I've noticed this early on, really from the time elementary school, that even in very young, first, second grade, that the kids that didn't do the best were always the ones that didn't conform and play by the rules. They may have acted out in class and refused to sit still. They may have made jokes and gone forth. And those kids were quickly put in special classes. One case, a guy or two people that were sent away to schools for troubled kids. And really, it was just poor behavior in class and school. And a lot of these kids never finished high school. I know one that went to prison, well, actually a couple now that I'm thinking about it, for several years. And when they got older, because they weren't conforming, they were getting sent, and I don't know why, but they weren't conforming. I think they were getting bad feedback, and a lot of them, to escape the negative feelings, started having issues with drugs and that sort of thing. So if you're not conforming, and even when you're young, I'm sure you've seen that, the kids that weren't conforming in your schools growing up, that it led to bad things. It led to poor academic performance, social problems, and drugs and other things. Most of those kids don't go to college. Some of them do go to college and then they dropped out. Many go to college and barely squeak by. But the idea is that if you're not conforming and doing what other people tell you and getting along, then schools, institutions will push you out. And that's kind of how it works. A lot of people that are very famous trendsetters and so forth, and social media and everything, are people that may not have conformed. And that's okay. That you can still do incredibly well in your life and have great careers if you're not a conformist. But in terms of working in a large law firm, unfortunately, that's really, really what you need to be in order to conform. I've seen partners in major law firms that didn't conform, and bad things happen to them usually. Even very successful partners, they may have conformed originally and then not, and had problems. And it's just crazy. I know partners that were named partners at major U.S. law firms and now are just running solo practices and stuff. So that aren't doing well. So the conforming is important, and it's really something that you just need to think about in the long run. And law firms will tolerate, just like companies, when the people that work there, a certain amount of nonconformity if you're producing at a very high level. But if you're not, and a final thing that I'll just kind of notice is different people stop conforming at different times. So I told you the example of some partners that stop conforming, and that partner stopping conforming would be things like someone that's been nerdy their life suddenly starts making a lot of money, and then they start doing things that are stupid and having fun and just making very bad decisions and getting in trouble. I was reading about the former CEO of Google the other day in a very interesting article. I think it was in Vanity Fair, and talking about how he became a womanizer and all these different things, which he's entitled to do. The behavior that people expect out of CEOs of most giant companies. So that's someone that was very nerdy and then became a nonconformist, and it happens to people. And many people go to great colleges. I saw that when I was in college. Got there and then suddenly, couldn't conform and started acting out with drugs and bad behavior, or just not even drugs and bad behavior, just giving up and stop conforming to do what was expected of them. Many times people go to good colleges and so forth, or even go to college to begin with because of pressure from their parents, or they go to law school because of pressure from their parents. And the only way to rebel against that pressure and be your own person is not to do well sometimes. So that's something to think about. And the thing is, many people on this call may be in large law firms and considering not conforming. Many people may be in small law firms and considering not conforming. And these decisions that you make can have disastrous consequences. When I was younger, I went to a private middle school and in a very kind of old money town. And I'd gone there had gone to a regular school in 7th grade and that school in 8th grade. And I wasn't necessarily fitting in with the kids there because I wasn't, part of country clubs and I was, living with a single mother and just other things. And this is a long time ago when that wasn't as normal, at least in this town. And so my way of getting attention and being happy was to stop conforming and making fun of the teachers and all that sort of thing. And that, of course, got me in a lot of trouble. It got me bad grades. It got me eventually kicked out. And so that sort of behavior is an example of nonconformist. People do it at different times. And if you're not conforming, that can have, again, disastrous consequences. Even in the business that I'm in, if you write about and say certain things that are considered nonconformist, then people will write negative articles about you and so forth because you're supposed to basically conform. And that's important for attorneys. It's just how this profession is, and it's not anything that you can necessarily prevent or avoid. There are certainly some firms where there are nonconformists, and I'll talk about that probably a little bit, but it's very difficult to find. And I work with partners all the time, and they decide things like they want to leave the practice of law, they want to spend time with their children, they want to travel, they may want to do something else, and then come back. And law firms, if you're just not playing the game and being part of their group for the long term, then they typically do not want to they're done with you. That's the end of the story because you haven't conformed. It's very difficult to get hired by law firms. Now, when the economy is very good, then sometimes if there's a dearth of corporate attorneys, then law firms may not hire them, different types of people. But for the most part, if you're not conforming, that's a problem. And attorneys that aren't partners will quit the law firms are in to travel or do something else. They may be viewed as nonconformist, and that can hurt, and then they're not hired. And then, so if you aren't able to show you're conformist and conforming to these things, then most large law firms won't have an interest in you. And there's a lot of reasons for that, I think. And it's not just that about conformity. It's also about the idea of your level of commitment and the fact that they can choose people that are committed versus you. But law firms are essentially brokers for legal services. And so the best law firms have to bring in people that have the best characteristics and are most likely to do the best work and conform and so forth. And it's just how the business model works. And it's not the fault of law firms. It doesn't make them bad places, but they're basically, the importance of them as the way they do human resources and so forth is huge. And conformity is expected really of everyone inside of large law firms. And they expect it pretty much out of their entire staff. And it's really because people are paying a lot of money for the work that's being done. And they want to be able to control the quality of it to the extent they can. And they need a whole system, an organism to work in a certain way. And it's almost like a sports team. A sports team, there's certain rules that the goalie has to follow in soccer. They have to stand behind the net, and they can only use their hands in certain boundaries of the field and so forth. There's certain rules that forwards and midfielders follow. And so and law firms expect the people on their team to follow certain rules, to conform, because that's how their team works. That's something to think about. And the system just doesn't work. And the system only works because the group kind of works as a group together and does things the way it should, and the way that based on the rules that have been set up. That doesn't mean the rules are always right, but most law firms expect you to do that. And so a big question, I think, when I talk to attorneys, I talk to them all day, every day, and I have been for decades, is the big thing that kind of occurs to me is that you need to ask yourself if you're better off being part of a group or you're better off doing something else and taking care of yourself and or others, and then yourself in the progress in some other way. And that is really a very complex decision. When I was practicing law with large law firms, and I bring my experience into this because I think the thought processes that I went through at the time are relevant to you as well, because you may be going through similar thought processes at some point. But I started doing asphalt work in Detroit when I was younger. And instead of doing things like working in advertising agencies for, as an intern and stuff. And it was very difficult trying this on my own, just like it's difficult when people try to do their own practice and so forth. But I knew that after I persevered for several years doing it, I knew that I could always support myself doing this work. Now, as you get older, I think it would be much harder probably to support yourself doing asphalt work, unless you've built a team of people. But I did see that I could do the work without having bosses and other people telling me what to do. And I liked the feeling of relying on myself and my own drive to be successful. And I liked the feeling that I could be driven by my spirit, and I didn't need other people's approval to do things, to do the kind of work. I could get up and do the kind of work I wanted, and if I didn't want to work for someone, I didn't have to. And I could also control the amount of money I made. And these are all the kind of decisions that I think that it's important for attorneys to go through when you're thinking about what you want to do. Because if you're unhappy with a large law firm, it may not just be the hours. It may be the fact that you have to work with all these people and you're accountable to all of them, and you want to be less accountable. There could be all sorts of reasons. When I entered the legal field, I quickly realized that when you're working with a large group of others, you really need to be very careful to get approval. And even if you impressed others, sometimes impressing them is not the right thing. I saw many people asked to leave different firms. I saw partners leave firms for not having enough business and being accused of things that, like mistakes or sex stuff, or I don't know. But I saw one partner lose a big client and be pushed down to a non-equity partner. I saw associates not get work for very long periods of time, or if at all, and have to leave because of upsetting like one partner, for example. And excuse me. So I saw a lot of stuff like that, and many people I saw at some point they rebel against the system and they just say this is ridiculous, and they end up leaving. And so I actually realized when I was in this kind of system that I had two decisions. I could either conform and play this game, or I could try something completely on my own. And I had all these memories because when I was younger, I instinctively started my own business and started doing this asphalt work, and that gave me a lot of self-confidence and in doing that type of work. And I realized that I had enough confidence to do things on my own. I knew it, and I knew that I was probably better off relying on my spirit and my own drive than others that protect me and advance me and show me the ropes and so forth. I just didn't feel like I could really rely on people as much as I needed to. And I realized that didn't work out. I could always change venues and go in-house in another environment. But for me, it didn't add up. And for most attorneys, it should add up. I'm saying I'm actually a very small minority of people that it doesn't add up for, because I had a different kind of set of motivations. And you have to conform in most law firms. Attorneys that are in different firms, often when I see them, I can tell the kind of firm they're with. They're often the exact firm they're with, just even if I don't know who they are. When I see them on public planes and things, and just how they're behaving, it's not that I'm some sort of gift. It's just that you realize after a long period of time that different people have similar personalities in different firms, and so it's about conformity. There's even the way they talk. There's the way they enunciate things. It's very funny, actually, to some extent, but the attorneys become very similar, and it's about conformity. When I was in law school, I remember, back then, I don't know if it was a good market or bad market, but almost everyone was able to get a job in a law firm, whether it was a large firm or small firm. And there was an attorney in my class that had gone to art school before becoming an attorney, and he dressed differently. He just looked like an artist. He just had long hair and stuff, and he really wanted to work in a law firm, but the law firms just were turned off because he didn't look and act, and he looked like he just didn't look the part. And so it's not, I certainly know plenty of people that are different in some respect and look different and act different that are working in major law firms. I'm not saying that this is the way it is completely today, but it is to some extent. You have to look the part, and you have to act the part, and to work in certain law firms. Now, certain law firms, other law firms are completely require different forms of conformity, and some law firms it may be much different. This example, but at the same time, every group has certain expectations about the way people should behave there. And I was talking to an attorney not too long ago, and she had been in a small firm of, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 attorneys. And there was one attorney in the firm that absolutely refused to work on, I don't know, Saturdays and Sundays. He said, "This is my time with my kids, blah, blah, blah." And he was a good attorney, and he even had a business. But at the same time, they couldn't rely on him. It was a litigation firm for trials and other things, or even if he had his own trials, he couldn't perform because he didn't work those days. And the firm actually was just like, "We can't have you here." And that was, I mean, it's an example of not performing or conforming, but it's stuff like that all the time. And so I think almost all law firms have certain rules about conformity if you want to work in them. And the thing to think about is people like that are in the public light, whether it's like Richard Branson or Donald Trump or things like that, those kind of people could never work in a law firm because they're just, and these are very public figures, but they certainly wouldn't last there or be happy. So there's nothing wrong with not wanting to work in a law firm. And because if you work in a law firm, you can't necessarily say what you want to say. You can be attacked for your opinions. You can be attacked for not towing the party line in terms of whatever the politics are, whether it's ultra conservative or moderate or liberal or ultra liberal. I mean, it's just you can have problems for not putting in the right amount of face time, for not billing enough hours, for not begging for work. I've seen firms where the attorneys are expected to beg for work. That's just the what's expected. I've talked to attorneys that work in places like LA or San Francisco, where a lot of the assignments come out of maybe New York, and basically the assignments are distributed at a certain time of day. So it could be like 8 a.m. in New York or 5 a.m. in the West Coast. And if you're not in front of your computer at the time they're assigned, you won't get work. And then it's just, there's all sorts of games like that, but that's part of the conformist and what firms expect. So you just have to understand the rules of what's required to conform where you're at. And lots of very well-known lawyers who never practiced law, like Barack Obama or Bill Clinton, got to a stage in a life where they would have had the opportunity to work in firms, and they decided against it. Barack Obama was a summer associate, I believe, with Sidley and Austin, but he didn't end up doing that. And Bill Clinton went to be a law professor right away. You have to understand what's important to you in terms of your career, and you can't succeed if you don't. And you just have to be able to conform. And just because you can't conform doesn't make you a bad person. It's not that there's anything wrong with you. It's just that you maybe need to be in another profession or more self-aware of yourself in terms of what is important to you and what you would be good at. And I've spent my entire career working with just lawyers, and I'm convinced that it's just a very conformist profession. I don't know, each law firm is its own beast, but it's not just about acting like everyone else. I mean, the level of conformity is about things like the time you put in to show that you're working hard. There's lots of attorneys that get up at 3:30 or 4 in the morning and start sending emails, so everyone sees that they're working at 3:30 and 4 in the morning. And it's just the thing, or people will pick up phones and talk to each other at that time. It's absolutely bonkers, but that's just the way it is in certain firms. There's other kinds of conformity, just other work you have to do. In school, you can't. I remember when I was in college, there were all sorts of interesting classes I would have liked to have taken, maybe physics and like a higher level type physics classes, and very more advanced economics classes, linear algebra, and some other things. But I certainly didn't take them because I didn't want to mess with my grade point average. So that's unfortunately means conforming, and you have to learn that early on. And I probably would have taken those classes if I thought I would do well in them, but it wasn't my strength. But I would have liked to have taken them, probably made much smarter. Lawyers have the need to impress others, first senior lawyers, then clients and judges if you're a litigator. So That's part of conforming. You can't go into court and be rude to a judge and expect to have a good career. You can't go into court and you can't be rude to senior attorneys and expect to have a good career. People will crush you just if you don't get along with them. Judges will crush you. People in your firm will crush you. Even your peers will crush you if they're jealous of you or they want to look better to other people. I've known so many attorneys that have actually quit the practice of law, even as partners, because they just don't like the pressure of conforming and trying to get along with others and playing by all these rules. And I'm really not judging any of this, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it. And as I told you earlier, this is just how firms work, and this is the kind of how they must behave and act in order to provide the level of service that the large clients want. And other professions, of course, require a lot of conformity too. Doctors, accountants, people working for companies, people in the military, and all sorts of other professions. I certainly, in terms of being a doctor, you're expected many times to work these 3 days on where you're working 72 hours straight and sometimes longer. That level of conformity is not something that I would be interested in, but it's required and it has a purpose, I'm assuming, because it provides cheap labor to hospitals to make them more profitable. It also prevents them from making mistakes, allows them to become doctors probably much faster with all that time than they might otherwise. I don't know, but it's just it's a purpose, and it's how the profession is developed. And so, if you want to be an attorney in a large law firm, you just need to decide if you're ready to conform. And in our particular company, in this BCG, and there's other companies here, we're not completely structured in a way that, from a management standpoint, that really takes advantage of a lot of the opportunities in the market. People aren't necessarily micromanaged, and the reviews aren't as consistent and so forth as they should be. And people are often given a high level of autonomy and allowed to operate independently. And it's not necessarily the most profitable way to run a company, but in a personal services business like this, it can work. And the best people without those systems in place typically are ones that are self-motivated and can operate without a lot of rules. And the people that do the best under our particular system typically don't operate with a lot of rules, where they're monitoring performance closely, and those kind of people have left when that happened. That's just the culture of this place, but it doesn't mean that everyone is like that. And when law firms have rules, the more rules law firms put in place, the more people will typically leave, and they'll just replace them with people that are interested in doing that. And the big thing, I think, is that there's a preference really for younger attorneys a lot of times, and the reason for that is because at the associate level is because of the fact that younger attorneys are more likely to be enthusiastic about the rules, and then when they get older, many times they don't want the rules. As they get more senior, and they start rebelling against the system that can be suffocating. And older attorneys with business want the rules because they want many times the law firm to make sure the work's being done. Law firms are just very dynamic organizations, and you need to understand whether or not this whole idea of conformity is something that works for you. And it may work for you and it may not. And the words of conforming can be awesome. The first firm I joined was out of law school was Quinn Emanuel, and that was a firm at the time that was just crazy. It was like the only firm in the country where there was no dress code, and people could wear sandals, and there were all sorts of unusual people there that you wouldn't find in large law firms, with different personalities and ways of acting and dress and stuff. And that form of conformity was not there, but at the same time, there was conformity in terms of the quality of work and the expectations for hours and bringing it. I mean, there's still conformity everywhere you go. It's not, you can't really escape it. And then as law firms grow and get bigger, there's always more and more conformity because they have to provide a consistent standard of work and stuff to larger clients. But I would say that if you don't find the idea of conformity, you find it very suffocating, you find like you can't deal with it, you have a couple of options. One is to embrace it and try the best you can to get along and do your best. And if there's problems or things about you that you can fix that would make you conform more, then do it. But honestly, I never think it's a good idea to try to be someone you're not. And because it just doesn't lead anywhere good. If you're trying to, it's just years ago, Michael Jordan was a professional basketball player and had all these skills and decided he was going to become a professional baseball player. And that's just not what he was. He wasn't that, and that didn't go well. And anytime you try to work in a field or something that just doesn't fit naturally, you shouldn't be doing it. Some people are born to be writers. Some people are born to be actors and actresses. Other people are born to be accountants and doctors and different things. And those things come naturally to them. And for some reason, they get off path and do something else. Now, that's not necessarily being an attorney that's going to make that happen to you, but it could be a lot of things. It could be going to a large law firm as opposed to a smaller law firm, or working with people that aren't like you versus people that you're more likely to be with. I see people all the time that are very uncomfortable in different organizations. Sometimes they're uncomfortable because I knew one law firm where, and it was a pretty big law firm in Los Angeles, where one of the people in charge of hiring said, we only pretty much hire nerdy Jewish guys like us. And I was like, okay, I didn't know what to say. And because how would you feel if you were part of that organization and you didn't fit into that? I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that Jews are racist or anything, because that's not the point. Is that some organizations you're going to be comfortable in, and others you won't. I've known other law firms where the people are just unbelievably uptight. They're the kind of people that, I don't know, will have these 15-minute rituals before they go to bed with their toothbrush and their pajama. I don't know. I'm just giving you an example, but there's just different personalities in different types of firms. Sometimes if you join the wrong firm, you may feel very uncomfortable because of your even just because of your geography. I've known people that went to work in small firms in the South and just felt like they never fit in because they were from other cities. And I've known people that were gay and felt very left out in firms and very uncomfortable and unable to get work. And even being from different ethnic groups can make things difficult for you. And sometimes it just depends. And there's different firms where the conformity is along all sorts of lines. And at most law firms, fundamentally, and most people try to be good. I remember I was talking to a very well-known attorney, a litigator, and he said to me that he became really good litigator and became very good at what he did when he realized that the way things worked is judges were actually always trying to be fair. Like they wanted to be fair, and they wanted to do what was fair. Now, that's not to say every judge is like that, but he said that most of them want to be fair. And most law firms are just want to be fair, and they want to do what they believe is the right thing. And so they're not necessarily trying to be evil and stuff when they have come up with these rules. They're trying to do what they think works or what's always worked. But you have to decide the type of conformity you want to expose yourself with, whether or not it's a law firm and what type of organization it's going to be. And it's important. If you're able to conform, then you can do well. If it's not something that's natural to you, then you may not. And it's just, I see far too many people also leave law firms because they just have these kind of negative ideas about what they are. And they buy into the psychology that other people have, where they believe that the large law firm is going to take over their personality, or they need to get in-house as quickly as possible. And they form all these conclusions about law firms before they even get there. And then when they work there, they bring in these preconceptions and so forth. And the people that do well are the ones that are able to think about the positives of what they're doing and buy into it and really do well. So I would urge you to think about how you conform, why you may be not interested in conforming, why conforming works for you. And before you leave a law firm and before you it doesn't work for you, really asking yourself if is it because of your inability to conform. And sometimes I hate to keep, talking so much about this because I do want to take questions, but at the same time, the big thing with conformity, I think, is the problem you? And is there something to do with you in the background that's making conformity difficult? Are there aspects of yourself that you need to look at and get help with? And so many times going into a very rigid atmosphere can give you an understanding of yourself, because there's certain people that can go into any atmosphere, really in any type of environment, and do well. And if you're not, what are the solutions to conforming? I think some of the solutions to conforming are really to get out of your shell and not to isolate yourself so much. So at firms, you should try to talk to as many people as possible and go to groups and really understand different people. I think that can help you because then people will share inside information with you about what they're looking for, and you'll get things. You always need to have a good amount of your time getting to know other people at work. You also need to get to know other people in other firms. And so this whole idea of networking is very important. And then to some extent, your conforming is going to even improve even more when you address any kind of psychological or social issues that may have harmed you in the past. And I don't know what those are, but everyone has things in their closet that are creating problems with them. A lot of times I've noticed the most successful attorneys have had major failures, either as young adults or when they were children, or they had something to prove to someone. And so that can make a big difference for you as well if you address the reasons behind your lack of interest in conforming and why you're rebelling. Are you rebelling against being controlled by others? Do you have problems with authority? Do you have anger towards a parent? Do you have anger towards a former authority figure? And so all those things are things that you can question. And I bring all this up just because I want you to succeed, and I want everyone that follows the things that I teach to succeed. And I think that people have succeeded based on a lot of the advice I'm providing. It's not all my advice. I mean, some of it I'm getting from other places and stuff, of course, because I read a lot. But you need to really delve into understanding the type of person you are. I went to a family reunion recently, and I have a cousin that's a very successful doctor. And she grew up in a single parent household, and her father died when she was young in a helicopter crash, but did very well and got scholarships to go to private schools and then to go to Johns Hopkins, and then to, I don't know, great medical school, and I don't know, some Ivy League medical school at Cornell or something, I don't remember. But she said she read one book one time, something about the power of being an introvert, and that really touched her and made her a much more successful person, because she realized that being an introvert and liking to study and everything was a good thing for her. And so I think also, and then it's made her much more secure in the type of person she is, and then understanding the aspects where she may not want to go out and socialize and stuff are normal for her type of person. Sometimes just reading one thing like that can really make a big difference in your life. And I recommend that everyone do what you can to expose yourself to things that could help you in a law firm and to really get by. A final thing is, I certainly don't offer it. I used to, but if you can get career coaches and people that will talk to you about your issues and things that are coming up, that can make a difference. I know people that don't necessarily interview very well that would be better served many times by getting interview coaching, which is something that we offer and have for all of our candidates. A lot of them turn it down, but getting insights into the reasons you're the way you are. And that could be professional coaches. It could be that know what they're doing. It could be a therapist. It could be all sorts of people. And whatever you do, I would encourage you to do what you can to expose yourself to all this stuff and to help you become hopefully a much better person and conform. So I'm going to take a quick break. I hope everybody that's on the call, you'll ask any questions that you have. I'm definitely excited to answer them. Answering questions on these weekly meetings is probably the most exciting time of my week, because I love hearing what people are thinking, and there's old people on this call and young people usually. Whatever the questions you have, I will answer them, and then I will be back in just like 2 minutes. I'm just going to grab some more coffee. Okay, so let's get started with questions. This is great. Looks like we have quite a few questions today. So let me just stop the share here, and I'm going to pull up just a blank Word document so we can look at some of these, and then we'll get started. That's interesting. I have a whiteboard. Close this. Okay, question. I'm going to start here. This is interesting. Looks like some good questions today. Okay. First one I'm going to answer it says reconforming. What is the best way for females to conform? Is it appropriate once hired to ask someone basically how to conform? And then what's the best way to demonstrate you're willing to conform other than youth? Okay, that's a great question. So let me just say at the outset that I have seen several examples of women having issues. Let me just change the size of this with conforming versus women that have not had issues with conforming. And I get the sense that, and I'm not a woman obviously, but that for women many times that they do feel a lot of pressure to in a profession that they may feel is male dominated. I don't know how much of that is true anymore to some extent. I think there's actually more women that go to law school than men. But at the same time, what's the best way for females to conform? The first thing is I think that just understanding the rules. And so every firm has different rules, and most of them are not necessarily based on being macho and all that sort of thing and male like. They're based on hard work, the ability to bring in business, the ability to socialize with people and so forth, and just understanding that the rules of most law firms are the same for regardless of whatever sex you are. And I don't think that compared to the way it may have been in the past, I don't think that there's a lot of this overt discrimination against women as there probably was in the past. But I do believe that one of the best ways to conform is probably to understand the importance of the rules of whatever law firm you're in. You don't necessarily need to ask how to conform. I think that you need to watch what people around you that are successful are doing, and then you need to just adopt that and really set that as the bar of what you want to achieve. And then the best way to demonstrate you're willing to conform is just to do what's asked of you and so forth. So if you're a female in an all male firm, I really believe that you're evaluated on so many different aspects in a law firm. You're evaluated socially, it's like social, political, intellectual, judgment. I mean, all these different things. And so I can't really give you any specific insights into the best way to conform that way. I think that most law firms they're in the business of making money, so they want to have different methods they want to make sure that people follow the rules that make the firm the most money. And so that's how I would think about it as a general rule. I think that one of the things that I've noticed that a lot of times is an important aspect is drawing attention to differences and so forth. Anytime someone draws attention to the fact or tries to get different treatment based on the fact that their sex or the quality of their law school or anything that or whatever, or the quality of firm they worked in the past, that the tendency is to not react well to that for most organizations. So I recommend that you do what you can to not put yourself in a position where you're evaluating yourself, you're bringing it to your attention, your differences. You can't say I expect special treatment because I went to a special law school. I expect special treatment because of this or that. You have to actually work along the rules that the law firm should evaluate people, which are things like hours, quality of work, allegiances, meaning the people that you're close with, business, all that stuff. And so keeping that as the forefront of what you are being evaluated on, I think is the most important thing. You want to think or do not think I'm special for the following reasons. So that's really the best way to think about it in terms of that. I would think those things. So you think hours, quality of work, allegiances, business, people in my corner. Most times to become a partner or get an advancement in a law firm, you need to have sponsors. And so you need to get people in your corner. You need to do the best work you can, to all these things. But saying, that I should be a certain type of person, I should be treated a certain parts way because of things that people hate, like family, social class, looks, work, where I worked before, or where I went to law school. And I'm not even going to get into the other stuff you're talking about because I don't want to go there. But these are the things you need to think. And so if you think along those terms, then you're going to do much better in the long run, and just concentrating on that. Because if you do these things well, then none of this stuff matters. And the problem is too many people, especially young attorneys, all these questions I get every week are like, I'm at a Vault 10 law school or a Vault 10 firm I'm in a top 14 law school, and all that stuff is good. But when it comes down to it, these are the things that law firms care about. They care about these things, and also people like me, potential commitment and all that sort of stuff. These are the things they care about. They don't necessarily care about that law school performance. That doesn't benefit the law firm. Performance, what else there is, or those sorts of things. So just think about all that stuff and try not to paint yourself into the wrong corner. People that think the do not think things end up getting into a lot of trouble compared to those differently. Next question is, I'm not sure where this is coming from, but it's, can you be a patent attorney without a science degree? So I'm not sure the exact qualifications for being a patent attorney, but yes, you can often you can petition the patent bar many times and do it with, you can for different math type stuff sometimes. I do believe I'm not sure. The other thing is that you can also be a patent attorney without a science degree if you can go to school and go back to school and take courses even in a community college that to qualify to take the exam. So I'm not sure exactly what those classes are, what they are, but I've seen people do that in the past. Yes. So I don't know what this one is. There's an article called that I would recommend reading by Harrison Barnes, article called "What Law Firm Titles Mean," and I would look that up. And just it's on BCG, and so in terms of how to answer your question, in terms of a law firm, there are all sorts of different levels. There's typically before you pass the bar exam, you're admitted to the bar, you're generally called a law clerk. And then after passing the bar exam, you'd be called a junior associate or just an associate. And then you have mid-level associates, partners, and also counsel level attorneys. So each of those people have different kind of responsibilities and in terms of different law firms. Some law firms do it differently. Then a lot of them will have staff attorneys. That staff attorney means that you're not tracked to become a partner if you do well. You're on different hour requirements. A lot of them will also have contract attorneys that may be short-term and that sort of thing. So that should hopefully answer your question. But I would review the article called "What Law Firm Titles Mean." Okay, let's see here. Okay, this question is, I'm a first-year litigator who absolutely loved working from home. Okay, I am able to work long hours and still have dinner with my significant other every night. My firm is bringing us back in the office in September, and I feel entirely trapped. Not because I have zero desire to commit to the office and sit in uncomfortable clothing all day, but because I need to move. I've ridden out the pandemic in a massive 2-bedroom apartment that I absolutely love in a lower cost living city. I now have to give all that up and go pay $1,000 more for a decently comparable 1-bedroom apartment, even the 30-minute commute to my office. The cities are, of course, different jurisdictions, so I can't even contemplate being a junior lawyer for at least another year. It doesn't help that the case percentage of my time right now is out of another office, so I'll be moving and going to the office to just sit on Zoom. I'm absolutely distraught. I need someone to talk me off the ledge. Okay, yeah, this is perfectly, the idea of having to work remotely is a big thing, and you're not the first person to bring up this issue in these calls. What I would say is that you should really be careful about putting your needs before the needs of your employer. I think that if the law firm wants you in the office, there's a reason for that. They typically want people in the office because they feel there's more camaraderie, they feel better work's done, they feel that there's better exchange of information and kind of energy that comes up with that and more. And certainly I understand wanting to be home and having dinner with your significant other every night. That makes perfect sense to me. And uncomfortable clothing, everything you're saying is exactly, perfectly feel the same way. I understand exactly what you're talking about. But at the same time, this is just what the law firm requires. And frankly, I think if you do go back to the office, you're doing what I do a lot of times with work and things, is you're thinking more in terms of comfort rather than you're putting your comfort first, which I like. I'm like that. I have these my house bean bags, and I love comfort, and I don't like commuting. And so I understand everything that you're saying. So it's not by any stretch of the imagination a bad thing. But if you do want to firm, I would say, especially this is what career is going to be. There's no way you shouldn't be getting face-to-face interaction with the law in a firm, because frankly, you're thinking right now like an employee. Probably I would say, what does it take to be an attorney? To be a good attorney, I would say that probably 30%, 30%, 20 to 30% is work quality. And maybe actually, 20 to 30%, 30% amount is 30 to 40%, and the remaining, what is it, be 50 to 70%, 50 to 70%, but no, 30 to 50%, be 30 to 50%. So that means, and social means in-person relationships, in-person learning, relationships, learning, contacts, alliance, availability, all that sort of thing. If you're in the office, you have the opportunity to get all that stuff, and if you're not, you won't. And people will say things to you in person that they would never say to you on a Zoom or on the call, on the phone, or via email. And that's where the real learning comes, and you learn all sorts of things when you're in person versus not. My recommendation to you is to actually be excited about going back into the office. If your priority is comfort, then there's nothing wrong with that. But there's jobs where you have a lot of, where you can actually make comfort a priority, which are things like being a professor. I mean, that where you can have more time to think and time at home, or working for the government and so forth. Those are different professions. But at the same time, I do think you need to be in the office. And even though you're going to be in Zoom, you're still going to be around other attorneys. You're going to watch the mannerisms and pick up a lot. And it's important. I hate to say it, but it's just something for you to think about. So that was a great question, and I appreciate it. Okay, let's see. A question here. And any additional questions you guys have is helpful for everyone on the call. So I think a lot of people have the same questions. The one you just asked, by the way, is something that I'm sure a lot of people have. So that was helpful to be able to answer that. The law firm I'm at as a summer associate is asking me to complete tasks I have no experience with. This meant working with a partner who was giving me instructions on what to do. The work I completed had mistakes in them, but these errors are not my fault, because they were due to me never having worked this type of document before. However, is it true that partners should have been reviewing the work that I produced as a summer associate? Okay, so when you're a summer associate, I think there's an article on Law Crossing called A Guide to Being a Summer Associate. It's a long article. That would be great. But if you can, that would be helpful. But that's on Law Crossing. One of the things I would tell you in terms of being a summer associate is that I've had similar experiences. When I was a summer associate, would walk into someone's office and they would say something like, and just some corporate stuff like, review this prospectus and tell me what some code is. And I'd be like, what the hell is this guy talking about? And I would sit there afraid to ask questions. So my biggest piece of advice, if you're a summer associate and trying to figure this stuff out, and not getting advice from partners, is to track down, is first of all, you're expected to push and figure out answers on your own to the extent you can. There's one guy that worked for me a long time ago, and it's probably 20 years ago, and it was when I was starting this company, Law Crossing. And one of the assignments I gave him was come up with something called the top 100 reasons to use Law Crossing. And he came back and he said, I can only think of 10. And he'd written 10 down. I'm like, this is crazy. I need 100. And so he sat there all day going like this. And by the end of the day, he only had, 30 or 40 or something. And I went through this exercise with him for the week. And he actually at the time was applying to law schools and having me write recommendations and everything. And I wrote him actually excellent recommendations, and he got into all the law schools he wanted to. But he couldn't do this. He wasn't smart enough to really study, because all you would need to do is say, okay, what are the benefits of using an online job board? What are the benefits of doing things this way versus that way? And he couldn't do that. So because he couldn't do that, I knew he didn't push hard enough, and he wasn't aggressive enough in finding answers. I was like, how could someone like that possibly ever be an attorney for me, or for anyone? Because if they're not willing to look for answers, then that's a problem. So part of the job of being a summer associate is it's almost like looking at really difficult math problems. For some reason, when I was in college, I placed in the advanced calculus, which was ludicrous, because it was insane. Like the textbook was like this thick for advanced calculus, as opposed to the textbook for medium calculus, and then regular calculus was like this thick. And I think they just expected that they didn't have to go into a lot of explanation because the people that were doing this were somehow gifted or something. I don't know. But I would literally sit in the library, or not the library, but in the basement of the dorms, in these little study cubicles, and sit there trying to understand some of these questions and problems for 5 or 6 hours at a time. And then eventually my mind was able to wrap itself around it, and I could. But wow, that's not normal. That was very difficult for me. And because I'm not gifted in by any stretch of the imagination in math. So it's like that with a lot of the assignments you get. You need to sit down and you need to concentrate and put all of your effort into to doing whatever you can to understand these assignments. But the best way to do it, to shortcut it, is to do Google research about what the topic is. But the biggest way is ask senior associates. Senior associates or mid-level associates or even junior associates have been through this before, and they've done it before. And they're not going to want many times to spend a lot of time explaining this stuff to you. But if you can track them down and make friends with them, then they will tell you how to do it. You have to remember that you shouldn't, and this is just very common for attorneys. They put themselves in this, young attorneys in this situation where they need to protect their ego and be in control. And you don't need to. You don't need to protect your ego and be in control. You need to, the solution to getting over this is to give up control and ask others and say you don't understand. Now, partners are going to get frustrated with you if they think that if you're bothering them, because their time is very valuable. You don't want to, if it looks like you haven't thought about this in depth, or if your mind's not clear enough, then it could be a bad idea sometimes asking them. Now, if it's a small firm and you have no choice, then you need to. But before you do that, you need to go through and do everything you possibly can. Like I'm telling you, when I spent 5 or 6 hours trying to understand a single freaking math problem, you need to do the same thing with these problems, with the issues that you're coming up with in your search and trying to do these assignments. Because the biggest mistake you can make is to go into a partner and give them the wrong answer because you haven't done enough research and found obvious things. The next mistake is to come in and give this long answer that takes into account, it has 20 different ideas in it, and the information's not synthesized. You need to think through it and make sure you're coming up with the right thing. Just like a good law school exam will basically give the answer very directly. And it's the same thing here. You have to make sure you understand what's important versus important. So that's how I would do things. I also, just as a general rule, like everything you do needs to be very carefully proofed in large law firms, because you can see here that this is lighting up with different suggestions and so just that sort of thing. So you always want to use proofing programs and things, because if you produce work that has a lot of typos and other errors in it, then the firm and the people in it will assume that your thought processes are also having errors in them as well. This is an interesting question. I like this one. If anybody has any additional questions, I'm happy to answer them as well, because I'm almost out of questions. Okay, how do you know if moving to a law firm is going to help or hurt a legal career? The big thing about you don't know, but there's a couple there, and I would spend a lot of time reading various articles and so forth that I've written, because that's a question that I typically will answer in those articles. But the big thing is, in terms of the best way to basically tell if a law firm is going to help or hurt your legal career, is to always ask yourself what you want. So if what you want is to make it depends on all the factors. The money you want to make, long-term opportunities, practice area, long opportunities, partner, easy to make partner or not, your practice area, all those sorts of things. So what you're asking is a very involved question. There's tons of articles about this on BCG, and different law firms have different things. But the biggest thing that I would map is there's one article on BCG that I wrote called Find Your Tribe or something. And I really recommend reading that article. And the reason I like that article for you is because I think that the most important thing to be a law firm that will help your career is to be with the people that are most likely to help you the most. I'll tell you one kind of funny story. Not too long ago, I was in a business, two different business networking groups. I was in one, or joining two different business networking groups. One was a bunch of basically people with fairly small, not very large businesses that were trying to scale them up. And the other was people with huge businesses that had started big businesses and sold them. And when I say huge, I don't mean huge, but 50 million, $100 million, $200 million companies and stuff. And so one was that. And I gave a presentation, a short one to someone, and a small one for smaller businesses. And when I gave the presentation, I talked about how some things like I told you earlier, like I didn't have a COO, like just chief operating officer. I was making a lot of bad decisions, and I was basically being very vulnerable. And this, I was new to the groups. They knew nothing about the size of the company that I ran, this is maybe a 150 person company. It's not a small company. But they just assumed that I was like this kind of guy that was basically working on my own based on the way I presented my problem. And after the meeting, the person that was in charge of it, I had a call with her not too long after that. And she said, "You're just not a good fit for this group. Your business is way too small. I'm going to recommend you talk to someone else." And I thought that was very strange because there were people that were like literally maybe owning like a couple of franchises, right? And not auto franchises, but auto repair places and stuff. And I was like, "All right, whatever you say, man." And so then she referred me to someone else, and I talked to this person, and the guy couldn't believe it. He was like, "What the hell? Like I work with people that are just trying to start companies. I don't know why she would have possibly referred me to you." But she actually kicked me out of her group because she thought, based on what I said, that I wasn't a good fit. And then a couple of weeks later, I went into another business group, and this was for the huge companies, and they loved me and they thought I was amazing, and I presented the same sort of problem. So the point is that I was in the wrong tribe, and so that those people the first one didn't recognize my strengths, whereas the second one did, and which I thought was very interesting, and that made me feel like I was with a much better group of people, and that I had a lot more to contribute. So I think that in your case, if you want to be happy, you need to be with a group of people that are more like you and that see your strengths and appreciate your strengths. It's just how it is. And so if you move to a law firm where there's more people like you, where there's more people likely to appreciate your strengths, it may be a much better law firm, or it may not be. But someplace that thinks you're going to do well and appreciates you is going to be much better. In your experience, how much does practice area have on job satisfaction and burnout? The practice area you're in depends. The experience you'll have in a different practice area will depend on your skill set and what's interesting to you and what's important to you. Some people very much enjoy litigation. Some people very much enjoy criminal defense. Some people very much enjoy family law. Other people enjoy patent law and real estate. And you have to really enjoy what you're doing. And then you have to be in the right setting. I know people that are immigration attorneys and they love it. I know other people that are immigration attorneys and think the work is very boring. I know other people that are litigators and they can't get enough of it. They think it's the most freaking exciting thing in the world. And I know other people that are completely burned out and stressed by it. So all this, the answers to your questions, they all really depend on you and what appeals to you, and then doing it in an environment that matters. So if you work in a big city, many times New York or Chicago or even LA, your experience in different practice areas is going to be much different than it might be in a smaller market, and it could lead to burnout. It could also lead to boredom in a smaller market if you're not working on things that are very exciting. If you're in a small market and you may be suing people over dog bites, and who knows, we can do that in a large market too, but it just depends. So you have to do what appeals to you. As a general rule, I've found that in the different practice areas that there's people that are very good and enjoy things that involve writing and analysis. And there's other people that enjoy writing, analysis, and arguing and fighting. There's other people that enjoy science and math. And there's other people that enjoy things like that, and corporate law or real estate. And so the difference between different practice areas, I think that most transactional attorneys tend to be people that do things like patent law or real estate or corporate. And they also tend to have been very good at math and science and gravitated towards that. Most litigators tend to be very good and interested in things like reading history. So, and then they get more satisfaction out of it. But you have to do something that you're excited about. And I think that if there's a practice area that you really naturally gravitate towards, you should do it. The wrong reason to do a practice area is because it's a hot practice area, or you feel like you can make a lot of money. Something has to appeal to you naturally about it, and it has to be something that that you gravitate towards naturally. And I don't know what that is, but for some people, it's family law. I mean, family law is it's confrontational, and it involves a lot of negotiation stuff. You just have to do what's right for you. Okay, when considering new opportunities, how can I find out which opportunities exist for professional growth and promotion within a law firm? So you have to look around and get a sense of what's going on at the firm. Many times talking and looking at people on LinkedIn that have worked there in the past and talking to them can be okay. Asking about the number of people that have been promoted to partnership. Also getting a sense of whether or not you feel like your contribution is going to be recognized there, how seriously many times the law firm takes interviewing you, and all that sort of thing. So professional growth and promotion mean different things. I would submit to you, especially as a young attorney, that your main goal should be experience, meaning the more experience you get, that's your professional growth. Getting exposed to different types of work, getting input from different attorneys about the quality of your work, getting to work on big matters, small matters, whatever it is, are going to really lead to your professional growth and make you a better attorney. I can tell you that if you go to a place like, I don't know, Sullivan and Cromwell or Cravath, really good firms, or Wachtell, they're not going to spend a lot of time sending you on retreats and things for professional growth. You're going to get incredible experience right there. I remember when I had a clerkship, and when I went into my first year and I was working, or my first or second summer, I was working in a big New York law firm, and I had a judicial clerkship, and they were like, if you're going to Cravath, no, if you decide you want to work at a firm like Cravath, that's which I don't think I would have gotten a job at because I wasn't a summer associate there. But they said, if you are working in a firm like Cravath, there's no reason to do a clerkship. The experience you get at Cravath is going to be far better than you'd ever get in a clerkship. Other firms, maybe it's okay. So, the quality of the firm is going to make a difference. Promotion is often a question of how mature the firm is or how mature the office is. Professional growth, you'll get at a good firm that has a lot of work. I would ask, do they have a lot of work? A lot of work. And if they do, if yes, that equals professional growth. And then the other thing that I would say is promotion. For promotion, that's often going to be quality of the maturity. More mature, less mature, better. Meaning age or age of office. New branch offices are good sometimes. And then it could also be things like the amount of work in the office. So those are lots of work. The other thing for promotion is your ability to clients. So I was speaking to a partner from a great firm in LA. Shepard Mullen called me not too long ago, and he said one of the things that makes our firm special is we actually teach our associates how to go out and bring in business, whereas other places they just want them to work hard and that sort of thing. So I thought that was pretty cool. I like Shepard. It's a great firm, and they do that. They'll teach you how to bring in clients, where other firms won't care. Some firms, it's often easier to bring in clients in smaller to mid-sized firms due to no conflicts. And then larger firms may be easier to bring in big clients, but more conflicts. So you have that going on. All right, let's see if that helps. Okay, the next question is, of counsel higher than partner? No, I would review the article on the website, what law firm titles mean. Law. And a counsel is not higher than partner. It's actually not a partner. It's higher than associate, but it's not higher than partner. And law firms typically use counsel to basically signify that the person that's counsel does not have the same demands on them that a partner would. Counsel, if you compare a partner versus a counsel, so the partner is supposed to have business, no business, work hard, work lots of hours, no hours. Owner, generally considered not a firm owner. That sort of thing. People traditionally in law firms became counsel when they got older. It's not necessarily the case anymore. People sometimes make counsel, they just don't look like they have what it takes to be partner, but they can do good work. huge demands, fewer demands, clients, that sort of thing. So that's the difference between a counsel and a partner. This next question is, can US-based and barred attorneys work internationally? If so, do they need to do anything first? That's a great question. And there's articles on BCG about that. But yes, you can work internationally in different places, and it depends on the country. But I certainly place international attorneys all the time. It's definitely something you can do. Thank you so much for all the questions today. And I look forward to talking to everyone again next week. Thank you.